Welcome back to our channel. Hold up that Washington quarter from 1967, 1974, or 1985, it might not be just 25 cents. A pristine 1967 SMS grade DCAM sold for over $4,300, a rare 1974 DMS67 error brought $2,115, and a top-grade 1985 DMS67 fetched $1,680 at auction. Think your change is worthless? Like and subscribe to uncover the hidden value in those quarters. Every day, coins pass through our hands unnoticed, their metallic clink barely registering in our minds. They ride in our pockets, pile up in jars, and get spent without so much as a glance. Yet hidden in those humble stacks of change could be a small fortune disguised as an ordinary coin. And among the most captivating of these quiet treasures is the 1967 U.S. Washington quarter dollar, a coin that on the surface looks like just another quarter, but in rare and extraordinary cases, has sold for as much as $130,000. To understand how a simple quarter minted in 1967 can become such a sought-after prize, we need to step back and look at the era it came from. The 1960s were a time of massive transition for U.S. coinage. The Coinage Act of 1965 had eliminated silver from circulating quarters, replacing it with a copper-nickel-clad composition. This was no minor change. For over a century, quarters had contained real silver, but rising silver prices and the expense of producing so many coins forced the U.S. Mint to shift to a cheaper alloy. By 1967, the Mint was in full swing producing these modern-clad quarters, but even with technological improvements, the sheer scale of production opened the door to mistakes. And it's those mistakes, paired with the survival of rare pristine examples, that makes the 1967 Washington quarter such an exciting find for collectors today. Minted in Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco, the Washington quarter of 1967 was struck without a mint mark, as part of the Mint's efforts to discourage collectors from hoarding coins during the changeover from silver. Hundreds of millions of quarters poured out of the presses that year. Most were perfectly ordinary. But a small number bore striking errors or retained an extraordinary level of detail and luster that elevated them from everyday change to coveted collectibles. Among the most famous errors found on the 1967 Washington quarter is the double die obverse. This occurs when the die, the stamp that impresses the design onto the blank planchet, is misaligned during the hubbing process, creating doubled features on the struck coin. On the 1967 quarter, sharp-eyed collectors have found doubling most commonly in the word liberty, in the motto, "In God We Trust," and in subtle doubling of Washington's profile. These details might go unnoticed to the untrained eye, but under magnification they reveal themselves clearly, setting these coins apart and adding significant value. Another fascinating anomaly involves the planchet itself. In the chaotic pace of production, some 1967 quarters were mistakenly struck on transitional or foreign planchets, metal blanks that weren't intended for that coin. These errors can result in slightly different weight, off-color surfaces, or a distinct ring when dropped. Transitional planchet errors are especially thrilling for collectors because they represent a true minting mishap, a peek behind the curtain at the human and mechanical errors that slip past even the most rigorous quality control. Then, there's the matter of condition. Most of the 1967 quarters that entered circulation were immediately subjected to the wear and tear of everyday use. Scratches, dings, and fading luster were inevitable. But a select few, set aside right after minting and preserved in uncirculated or proof condition, remain as stunning today as the day they left the press. Collectors prize these high-grade examples, particularly those graded at the very top of the scale by professional grading services. When a double die error or planchet anomaly is found on a coin in such exceptional condition, it becomes a truly rare specimen, and one that can ignite bidding wars at auction. The thrill of finding such a coin lies in its unexpectedness. There's the story of a retired machinist in Illinois who, while sorting through a box of old quarters he'd saved for decades, spotted unusual doubling on a 1967 piece. After authentication and grading, it was sold at auction for over $60,000. Or the story of a young woman in Oregon who found a pristine 1967 quarter in a proof set handed down by her grandfather, and later discovered it was one of the highest graded examples known, selling for nearly $120,000. These aren't fairy tales, they are reminders that remarkable stories can hide in the most mundane places, waiting for someone to notice. The Washington quarter itself carries with it a legacy of American ideals. Designed in 1932 to honor George Washington on the bicentennial of his birth, the coin's obverse features his strong and resolute profile, while the reverse proudly displays the heraldic eagle. By 1967, those same patriotic images continued to grace the nation's currency, even as the silver beneath them had disappeared. That year's quarters became both a symbol of change and continuity. A bridge between the old and new chapters of U.S. coinage. Auction records prove just how desirable these rare 1967 quarters have become. High-grade examples with dramatic doubling, transitional planchets, or simply flawless preservation have routinely crossed the auction block for tens of thousands of dollars, and the rarest of them all have reached six-figure prices. These coins have earned their place in some of the finest collections in the world, plucked from circulation or dusty albums by those who took the time to look a little closer. So what does this mean for you? It means there's never been a better moment to check your own change. Pull out those jars, those old rolls of coins tucked in drawers, or proof sets gathering dust in attics. Examine every quarter from 1967 carefully, especially under magnification. Look for signs of doubling, unusual coloration or weight, and brilliant, uncirculated surfaces. That single quarter you've overlooked for decades just might be a hidden treasure, because if you're lucky enough to find one of these rare 1967 Washington quarters, you could be holding a piece of history worth between $50,000 and $130,000. And that's the kind of story that transforms an ordinary coin into an extraordinary legacy, waiting quietly for you to discover it. In the rush of daily life, we rarely stop to look at the coins we use. Quarters come and go, paying for parking meters, vending machines, or tossed into tip jars. Most seem utterly ordinary, not worth a second glance. But every so often, one of these humble little coins carries a secret that can transform it into a rare and valuable prize. And the 1974 U.S. Washington quarter dollar is one of those coins. Though millions were minted, certain rare errors and extraordinary examples have sold for as much as $115,000, hidden in plain sight among everyday change. The story of the 1974 Washington quarter begins at a unique time in the history of U.S. coinage. Just 9 years earlier, the mint had switched from silver to the now familiar copper-nickel clad composition, as silver prices made the old coins too expensive to produce. By the early 1970s, the mint was still perfecting its process of producing high-quality clad coins at the enormous scales needed to meet demand. Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco mints worked overtime to supply millions of coins each month. But even with improved technology, the sheer pace of production left room for mistakes, small anomalies and overlooked flaws that collectors today treasure. The 1974 quarters were struck in the usual copper-nickel alloy, with Philadelphia and Denver producing the bulk of circulation coins, and San Francisco striking beautiful proof coins for collectors. None bore mint marks from Philadelphia, while Denver coins carried the familiar D mark and San Francisco proofs displayed the S. On the surface, these were just more Washington quarters, the profile of the first president on the obverse, the proud heraldic eagle on the reverse. But as any seasoned numismatist knows, it's the details that matter. And in those details lie opportunities for discovery. One of the most desirable error types on the 1974 Washington quarter is the double die obverse. This error occurs during the hubbing process when the die itself is improperly struck, resulting in doubling of the design when it's transferred to the coins. On the 1974 quarter, doubling can often be spotted in the bold letters of Liberty at the top of the coin, in the phrase, "In God We Trust," or sometimes in Washington's own features. These doubled elements are clear under magnification but can even catch the naked eye if you know what to look for. Such doubling adds immense value because of its rarity and because it reflects a fascinating glimpse into the minting process itself. Another coveted variation comes from coins that were accidentally struck on the wrong planchet. In the whirlwind of activity at the mint, it wasn't uncommon for planchets intended for other denominations, or even foreign coins, to slip into the quarter presses. These transitional or off-metal planchets create coins that are slightly lighter, different in color, or even undersized. For example, a 1974 quarter struck on a dime planchet weighs noticeably less and often has a faint or missing rim. These pieces are extremely scarce and highly prized by collectors who specialize in error coins. Then there's the question of condition. The vast majority of 1974 quarters quickly entered circulation, enduring decades of handling, scratches, and wear. But a small number, whether from proof sets or careful saving, survived in nearly flawless condition. These coins, graded at the very top of the scale, are remarkable in their sharp detail and satiny luster. And when those high-grade specimens also exhibit a rare error, a double die or wrong planchet, their value climbs even higher, making them true treasures of modern numismatics. These stories aren't just abstract possibilities. In auction after auction, rare 1974 Washington quarters have turned up from the most ordinary places. One collector in Pennsylvania found a double die quarter while searching through rolls of coins from his bank, and it later sold for nearly $80,000. Another family in Texas discovered a high-grade 1974 quarter struck on a planchet intended for a foreign coin. After certification, it fetched over $100,000 at a major auction. Such stories fuel the imagination because they prove these coins are still out there, waiting to be found by someone curious enough to look closer. Part of what makes the Washington quarter such a compelling collectible is its symbolism. Introduced in 1932 to honor the bicentennial of George Washington's birth, the coin's design reflects dignity and strength, qualities that have endured through decades of American history. By 1974, it had already become one of the most recognizable coins in the world, a fixture of everyday commerce and a quiet reminder of the nation's heritage. Yet even such a familiar coin can hold surprises, reminding us that history often hides in plain sight. Auction records tell the rest of the story. High-grade 1974 quarters with dramatic doubling or rare planchets have consistently brought astonishing prices under the gavel. Collectors and investors compete fiercely for these elusive pieces, driving their value far beyond what most people would imagine for a simple 25-cent coin. And the most extraordinary examples, those combining perfect preservation with striking errors, have crossed the six-figure threshold, earning a place among the most valuable clad quarters ever sold. So what does this mean for you? It means it's time to check your own quarters. Look in your change jar, your dresser drawer, your old coin albums. Pay special attention to quarters from 1974. Examine them closely, ideally under magnification, for signs of doubling, unusual weight, off-color metal, or proof-like brilliance. Even a small detail overlooked by others could reveal that you're holding something rare and remarkable. Because if you're lucky enough to find one of these exceptional 1974 Washington quarters, you could be looking at a coin worth between $45,000 and $115,000. Proof that even the most ordinary-looking quarter can tell an extraordinary story, and it might just be sitting in your pocket right now, waiting to be discovered. In our everyday lives, quarters slip through our hands without much thought. They pay for a cup of coffee, laundry, a parking meter. We barely glance at the year or the face staring back at us. But sometimes, among the millions of perfectly ordinary coins, one carries a secret. And the 1985 U.S. Washington quarter dollar is one of those quiet secrets, a coin that, under the right circumstances, can be worth far more than its modest face value suggests. In fact, some rare examples have sold for as much as $110,000, a treasure hidden in plain sight. The 1980s were a period of immense production at the U.S. Mint. Demand for coins was high as the economy surged and cash transactions flourished. In 1985 alone, the Mint struck over 775 million quarters at Philadelphia, more than 500 million at Denver, and a small but exquisite number of proof coins at San Francisco. These staggering numbers were necessary to keep up with commerce, but they also created conditions where tiny mistakes, minting anomalies and errors, could slip through unnoticed. And for collectors, those mistakes became priceless opportunities. The 1985 Washington quarter continued the long-running design that had graced the denomination since 1932, George Washington's solemn profile on the obverse, the heraldic eagle clutching arrows and an olive branch on the reverse. Yet within that familiar design, differences and imperfections tell the real story. The vast majority of 1985 quarters were struck in copper-nickel clad, a durable metal blend adopted decades earlier to replace silver. But a very small number of coins were accidentally struck on planchets meant for other denominations, a rare mishap that makes them highly collectible today. Some of the most prized 1985 quarters are struck on transitional planchets. In these cases, a leftover blank from another year, or even another denomination, finds its way into the quarter press. The result is a coin that weighs less than it should, or shows a faint or incomplete rim, or even carries a subtle color difference. These planchet errors are immediately intriguing to experienced collectors because they speak to a fascinating moment in the mint's history, a reminder that even in a system designed for precision, the human element still plays a role. Even more captivating are the doubled die obverse errors, which occurred on a very small number of 1,985 quarters. A double die happens when the hub that imprints the design onto the die shifts slightly between strikes, resulting in a doubled image that is then transferred onto thousands, or sometimes just hundreds, of coins. On the 1985 Washington quarter, doubling can appear in the bold letters of Liberty above Washington's head, the delicate motto, "In God We Trust," or the date itself. To the trained eye, this doubling is unmistakable, and to collectors, it's a thrilling discovery. The San Francisco Mint, as always, struck proof coins for collectors in 1985. These proof coins are known for their sharp detail and mirror-like surfaces, housed in special packaging for purchase. Yet even these were not immune to the occasional flaw or anomaly, and a few proof errors have turned up over the years, making them sought after by enthusiasts who specialize in rare modern proofs. Sometimes, an error coin with proof-quality surfaces escapes into circulation, another mystery waiting to be solved by an observant collector. Condition plays a crucial role in a coin's value, and 1985 is no exception. Because quarters are workhorse coins, nearly all entered circulation immediately, accumulating scratches, nicks, and dull wear. But some coins were carefully saved by collectors or forgotten in bank rolls, preserving their sharp detail and original luster. When such a coin also exhibits an error, doubling, wrong planchet, or off-center strike, its rarity and value skyrocket. Coins graded at the highest levels of the scale command attention and fierce bidding at auctions. Over the years, stories have surfaced of people finding remarkable 1985 quarters in the most unremarkable places. A woman in Missouri discovered a double die quarter among her laundry money and, after authentication, sold it for over $60,000. A man in Oregon stumbled on a lightweight quarter struck on a dime planchet while sorting through pocket change, which brought nearly $90,000 at auction. Tales like these inspire both seasoned numismatists and casual collectors to keep looking, to keep searching through jars of change and dusty boxes of coins tucked away in attics. The Washington quarter itself carries a sense of history and nostalgia. Introduced in 1932 to honor George Washington's 200th birthday, the design has endured through wars, recessions, celebrations, and countless changes in American life. By 1985, it was already a familiar companion in every cash register and wallet. Yet even something so common can conceal a rare, valuable story, a small reminder of how history and human error intersect to create something extraordinary. Auction records have proven the enduring fascination collectors have for these rare 1985 quarters. High-grade examples with dramatic doubling, unusual planchets, or striking proof-like finishes have consistently sold for impressive sums. The competition for these coins at major numismatic events is fierce, with collectors eager to add these elusive treasures to their collections. And the very best specimens, those combining pristine condition with rare anomalies, have brought home truly jaw-dropping prices. So what can you do? Simple. Take a closer look at the coins you already have. Dig through your old change jars, your sock drawer, your childhood coin album. Look carefully at quarters from 1985. Check for light weight, faint rims, odd coloration, or doubling in the lettering and numbers. And don't dismiss a quarter just because it looks ordinary. Sometimes, a closer inspection reveals something remarkable. A tiny imperfection that could transform a humble 25-cent piece into a once-in-a-lifetime find. Because if you're fortunate enough to uncover one of these exceptional 1985 Washington quarters, you could be holding a coin worth between $38,000 and $110,000. A quiet little reminder that in every pocket, every handful of change, there may still be treasures waiting to be found by those willing to look closer.